All right, here we go again. Back with West Side history. Thanks to my period four for coming up with that name. All right, so in our last video, we covered the primary process, and I gave you a brief little GIF content of the conventions, the national conventions. That brings us to the general election where people vote. They cast their vote on a ballot and it adds up to the popular vote, but the popular vote, sorry to say it, doesn't win the election. The Electoral College does, and that's what we're going to be talking about today in this lesson. So we're actually going to compare the types of elections it takes to win the presidency. It's called a proportional election, and like the primaries. The primaries are mostly proportional elections, and a winner-take-all election, like the Electoral College. And so we're going to kind of compare those two things. So let's get to it. I like to show this video to demonstrate the comparison between a winner-take-all system and a proportional system. You'll see here two people. This is Ricky Bobby, I believe is his name. This is from the movie Talladega Nights. And he's chasing after his dad, and he's making a statement about how his dad influenced him. Let's have a listen.
That was for you. You know that? I did just like you told me. If you ain't first, you're last. What the hell are you talking about? Well, you told me that day at school for career day. You came in and you said, if you ain't first, you're last. Oh, hell, Ricky, I was high when I said that. But that doesn't make any sense at all. First, you're last. You can be second. You can be third, fourth. Hell, you can be fifth.
Love that members only jacket. Just noticed that. Anyway, so how do we decide who wins elections? You would think it would just be based on the popular vote, right? Wrong. So we have two types. We have a winner-take-all system and we have a proportional system. Ricky Bobby is the winner-take-all guy. He's basically like, if you're not first, you're last. Basically, you win everything or you win nothing. That's a winner-take-all system, basically. You could win all the delegates or you could win all of the electors and possibly make it to the presidency, or nothing. Or there's a proportional system, which is you can be second, you can be third, fourth, fifth, hell, can you even be sixth? I think I took it one step further, but whatever. You get the point, that you get a little bit of something, and that's a proportional system. So we see this in the primaries. You guys took a look at this a couple weeks ago. This is the 2016 primaries, but you see kind of a breakdown of different numbers here. In some states like South Carolina, it's like Trump got all 50. That's weird, and no one got anything else. But in New Hampshire, he got 11, and Cruz got 3, and Rubio got 1, and Kasich got 4, right? But then in all of the ones for Sanders and Clinton, they all got something, right? So if it was a close election, I mean, Clinton won in Iowa with 23, but Sanders got 21, right? But in New Hampshire, he got 15 and she got 9. What's happening here? So basically, what happened in South Carolina is South Carolina chose to have a winner-take-all primary. So some Republican primaries are winner-take-all. The person who wins gets all of that state's delegates, right? Because you're trying to win delegates in a primary. But in a Democratic primary, it's proportional. So in Iowa, Democrat elections are proportional. So Clinton won a proportion of the total delegates in Iowa, which was 23. Sanders got slightly less with 21 of Iowa's delegates. It's based on the percent that they won in that state, similar to New Hampshire. Sanders won a proportion of that state's delegates. So he got 15 of the delegates for New Hampshire, whereas Clinton got 9. So presidential primary elections are both winner-take-all and proportional. So Republicans, some states are winner-take-all and some states are proportional, like we just saw, right? South Carolina was winner take all, but Iowa was proportional for Republicans. Democrats do this weird thing that we talked about in the last presentation, which is all their states are proportional, right? That they win, the candidates win a proportion of the delegate count in the primaries, but there's also this weird thing called super delegates, and that led to the crime of 2008 for Hillary Clinton, which was that she won the majority of the popular vote and the delegates from the popular vote, but she did not win the super delegates, right? That's the weird Democrat thing in the primaries. So the Electoral College is different. The Electoral College is winner take all. So there's some questions in your notes that go along with this that I'd like you to jot down if you haven't already. Um, so this video covers it pretty nicely, and I'm going to go over the answers with you. But again, feel free to slow down, speed up, skip through. You could even open up the YouTube to the TED Ed that actually did this and not watch it. It's so meta right now. It's like a video in a video in a slide. It's crazy. Here we go.
Most people have heard of the Electoral College during presidential election years. But what exactly is the Electoral College? Simply said, it is a group of people appointed by each state who formally elect the President and Vice President of the United States. To understand how this process began and how it continues today, we can look at the Constitution of the United States. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. It specifies how many electors each state is entitled to have. Since 1964, there have been 538 electors in each presidential election. How did they decide on the number 538? Well, the number of electors is equal to the total voting membership of the United States Congress, 435 representatives plus 100 senators and 3 electors from the District of Columbia. Essentially, the Democratic candidate and Republican candidate are each trying to add up the electors in every state so that they surpass 270 electoral votes, or just over half of 538 votes, and win the presidency. So how do states even get electoral votes? Each state receives a particular number of electors based on population size. The census is conducted every 10 years, so every time the census happens, states might gain or lose a few electoral votes. Let's say you're a voter in California, a state with 55 electoral votes. If your candidate wins in California, they get all 55 of the state's electoral votes. If your candidate loses, they get none. This is why many presidential candidates want to win states like Texas, Florida, and New York. If you currently add up the electoral votes of those 3 states, you would have 96 electoral votes. Even if a candidate won North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and West Virginia, they would only gain 31 electoral votes total from those 8 states. Here's where it can get a little tricky. On a rare occasion, like in the year 2000, someone can win the popular vote but fail to gain 270 electoral votes. This means that the winner may have won and collected their electoral votes by small margins, winning just enough states with just enough electoral votes, but the losing candidate may have captured large voter margins in the remaining states. If this is the case, the very large margins secured by the losing candidate in the other states would add up to over 50% of the ballots cast nationally. Therefore, the losing candidate may have gained more than 50% of the ballots cast by voters, but failed to gain 270 of the electoral votes. Some critics of the Electoral College argue the system gives an unfair advantage to states with large numbers of electoral votes. Think of it this way. It is possible for a candidate to not get a single person's vote, not one vote, in 39 states or the District of Columbia, yet be elected president by winning the popular vote in just 11 of these 12 states: California, New York, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Georgia, or Virginia. This is why both parties pay attention to these states. However, others argue that the Electoral College protects small states such as Rhode Island, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and even geographically large states with small populations, like Alaska, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. That's because a candidate can't completely ignore small states, because in a close election, every electoral vote counts. There are certain states that have a long history of voting for a particular party. These are known as safe states. For the past 4 election cycles, in 1996, 2000, 2004, and 2008, Democrats could count on states like Oregon, Maryland, Michigan, and Massachusetts, whereas the Republicans could count on states like Mississippi, Alabama, Kansas, and Idaho. States that are teetering between parties are called swing states. In the past 4 election cycles, Ohio and Florida have been swing states, twice providing electoral votes for a Democratic candidate and twice providing electoral votes for a Republican candidate. Think about it. Do you live in a safe state? If so, is it a Democratic or Republican safe state? Do you live in a swing state? Are your neighboring states swing or safe? Is the population in your state increasing or decreasing? And do not forget, when you're watching the electoral returns on election night every 4 years and the big map of the United States is on the screen, know that the magic number is 270 and start adding.
All right, let's see if we can't answer some of these questions in your notes. So your notes has this video guide here. I went ahead and typed in the definition there. The Electoral College is just a group of people appointed by the states that formally elect the president and the vice president. So the Electoral College is not something you apply to and get into as a senior in high school. It is an actual process of electing the president, and they're actual people. The electors in the Electoral College are actual people that cast your vote for president and vice president, just like delegates cast your vote for the Democratic or Republican nominee for president in a presidential primary. Electors do the same in the Electoral College. So where does it come from? It's Article 2, Section 1 in the Constitution is where the process for the Electoral College comes from. How many electors are there? There are 538 electors in the Electoral College. Where does that number come from and what is it based on? I actually really like that image in the video. I might just skip ahead to it to show you. There's a little, there it is. There's a little circle there with a little graphic that shows you that the number of electors is based on the representation we have in Congress. So there's 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. So there's 435 electors. So depending on how many representatives your state has in the House of Representatives, then you get that many electors in the Electoral College. So California has 53 representatives in the House of Representatives, and therefore we get 53 electors in the Electoral College. But we also have 100 senators, right? 2 per state. So every state gets at least 2 electors in the Electoral College based on the senators they have. So going back to the example of California, California has 53 representatives plus 2 senators, so we have a grand total of 55 electors in the Electoral College. These little 3 guys that were sprinkled in there represent Washington, D.C. Since people do live in Washington, D.C., but it's not quite a state, they don't have representation in Congress. So the Constitution, the amendment in the Constitution gave them 3 electors in the Electoral College so that their vote counts towards the overall election. All right, so that's where the vote comes from. Where are we? What is it based on? It's based on our representation in Congress. So if you want to add an example like California, California has 53 representatives in the House, 2 senators. Therefore, we have 55 electors in the Electoral College. They're not the same people. It's just what the number is based on. You can become an elector if you're over 18. You just have to know and know someone in the party. I think you fill out a form and you can become an elector in the Electoral College. And if your state votes for Biden in 2020, in November of 2020, then you would go to the Electoral College and cast your vote for Biden, which is likely because we are a safe state for the Democratic Party. Okay, what does the government conduct every 10 years? What are they trying to determine? Well, I just filled mine out for the 2020 census. So every 10 years, the government conducts the census, and they're trying to determine how many people live in that state. So if the population of California goes down, then so does our number of electors and our number of representatives. If the population of California goes up, then our number of representatives goes up and the number of electors goes up as well. We currently hold the most of any state. So the census helps us determine that. States get more or less electors based on their representation in what? I think I just said that, but the House of Representatives. How are electors distributed when a candidate wins a state? Well, winner takes all. When a candidate wins a state, they win all that state's electors. So if you win California, you get all 55 electors. If you win Texas, you get all 38 electors. Strange situation that occurs related to the winner and the popular vote. Well, you can lose the popular vote and win the Electoral College, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. But it has to do with the proportion of electors to actual population. So there's two ways you can answer this question. You could either say you can lose the popular vote and win the Electoral College, or lose the popular vote and win. Did I just say that? Win the Electoral College. Yeah, you get what I'm trying to say, I think. Safe states are states that teeter between parties. That's sometimes they vote Democrat, sometimes they vote Republican. They go back and forth. And safe states are states that hold true to one party for an extended period of time. California is a safe state for the Democratic Party. Swing states are like Ohio or Florida that swing back and forth. They sometimes vote Republican, sometimes vote Democrat. Out of 538 total electors, the magic number is 270 to win. And you need 270 electors to win the Electoral College. And if you do not win the Electoral College, you cannot win the Electoral College without 270 electors, and that's the official map there. Like I said, the highest number of electors is 55 in California. The lowest amount any state can have is 3 electors. That is because every state has 2 senators and at least 1 representative in the House. So that's why 3 is the lowest number here. All right. So we're going to look at a couple of scenarios. We're going to look at the 2012 presidential election, and we're going to look at the 2016 presidential election, and we're going to try to determine, okay, what is the thing about winner take all elections, and how can we compare them to a proportional election? What if the Electoral College was actually based on the proportion of votes that these candidates get? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of the 2012 election and the 2016 election. So if you take a look at California and Texas, oh, there they are, my 2 candidates. We've got Barack Obama. I'm going to call him Barry because he's my friend. I'm going to call him Barry for the purposes of this assignment. We have Mitt Romney over here, straight out of the Book of Mormon. I love young photos of politicians. It makes me feel like they're human. Okay, so you're going to take down the number of electors they win in the Electoral College, which is winner take all, and then we're going to compare it to if they could win a proportion, if this was a proportional election. So in a winner take all election, Barry would win all 55 of California's electors, and Mitt Romney would get 0 in California because it's winner take all, right? So the most votes, even if it's 50.1% compared to like 49.9% of the vote, that doesn't matter. He got a majority of the votes and he wins all of the electors in the Electoral College. For Mitt Romney, he won all of Texas, so he would get all of Texas's 38 votes in the Electoral College, and Barry would get zero, zero in this winner-take-all system. But let's see how it would shift if it were proportional, if it were actually based on the popular vote, if like it were in the primaries, right? Like, let's try to see what would happen. So this is a breakdown of the popular vote percentage in the 2012 election of Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney. So Barry actually only got, just in California. So he actually only got 60% of the vote in California, and Mitt Romney got about 37%. I'm going to round it up to 40 because I got it 40% because I got to do a little math here and I'm not that great at math. So if I were to take a proportion of the electors, all I would have to do is multiply the 55 electors in California by the percentage of the popular vote that each person got. I'm going to do the same for Texas. So it's a similar breakdown. It's about 60% of the vote for Mitt Romney and about 40% of the vote for Barack Obama. So again, I'm going to multiply the 38 electors by the percent of the popular vote that each candidate got. So when I do that, Obama, again, 55 of California's electors multiplied by the percent of the popular vote, which was 60%, would give him 33 of the electors in California. Not the total 55, but just 33. And then that would actually give Romney 22 because I multiplied the 55 electors by 40% of the popular vote, which would give him 22 electors in California. All right, not bad. Same thing for Texas. There's 38 electors in Texas. Multiplied by 40% of the popular vote is going to give him 15 for Obama. And then I'm going to multiply 38 electors in Texas by 60% of the popular vote for Romney, and that's 23. All right, let's see what that adds up to. So that's 48 electors for Barry over here to Mitt Romney's 45 electors. So if you notice, it's kind of a lot closer than the 55 to 38. It's actually a proportion of what the people wanted, right? If it was actually based on what a proportion of the popular vote in each of these states, it'd actually be pretty close between the two candidates. So this sort of demonstrates a similar effect in the overall election. So in the winner-take-all Electoral College election in 2012, Obama got 332 electors to Romney's 206, which seems insane. Like, Obama won by so much. It makes him seem like the perfect candidate to represent the country, and he's winning a lot, right? But then if we added up the percent of the popular vote and multiplied that by the 538 total electors, that would actually only give Obama 274 to Romney's 264, which is a lot closer. But what's the magic number needed to win the presidential election? It's 270 to win. So Obama still would have won, but it's a much closer election than if it were a proportional. So we got a landslide over here and a winner take all compared to close elections. And so that's what ends up happening. I think there's a little space in your notes to take that down. That's what ends up happening in the 2012 election. This is what ends up happening in a winner take all election. We have landslide elections that kind of boost the confidence in the winner. Yeah, and it makes it seem like they have a lot of support of the people. All right, let's see what happened. I'm gonna skip this because they keep calling me out on YouTube for using copyrighted songs. They're probably gonna catch that one, but maybe I won't get in trouble. All right, so in 2016, let's do a similar thing. So we're gonna look at Clinton versus Trump. I mean, just by the outline, it looks very clearly like Trump had a big win, and he did. but let's break it down based on the popular vote and see if we can skew the outcome with a proportional election. So, again, if we look at the percentage of the popular vote, Hillary Clinton did get not a majority, but she got a plurality. She got the most votes. She got 48% compared to Donald Trump's 46.3. So this gave him 306 electors in a winner-take-all electoral college election to Hillary Clinton's 232 electors, which again, it makes it look like he won by a lot, and he did. In a winner-take-all election, you always look like you won by a lot. But what's interesting about this election is there were a lot of third-party candidates that sort of took away a small percentage, but a percentage nonetheless, of the popular vote from, either Trump or Clinton. So again, if I were to multiply the 538 total electors in the Electoral College by the overall popular vote, I multiplied 46% by 538, which is for Trump. He would have actually only gotten 250 electors in the Electoral College. And then for Clinton, I multiplied the 538 electors by the percent of her popular vote, which was 48%. And that would give her 259 electors. So, did anyone get 270 to win? The answer is no. I wish you guys were here to say it, but you're not. But the answer is no. So what happens then, basically? Well, first of all, let's just take a look at how many electors went to third-party candidates in a proportional electoral vote. So Trump would have gotten 250, Clinton 259, Gary Johnson 19, Jill Stein 7, Evan McMullin 3. So in a proportional election, third parties stand a chance. But do third parties stand a chance in the United States electoral election? No. And the reason is it's an electoral college vote is winner take all. You win everything or you win nothing, right? It's if you're not first, you're last. There's no second, third, or fourth here. It's winner take all. And in an electoral college, you just can't win enough as a third party candidate. So sorry, Johnson, Stein, McMullin, Castle. It just wasn't happening for you. But again, back to the issue here, no one would have gotten 270 to win. So if the election were proportional, no one would have gotten 270 electoral college votes. So what happens is the vote goes to the House. So if no one gets a majority, if no one gets 270 to win, the House of Representatives actually decides. And in 2016, the House of Representatives was a majority Republican representatives. So in 2016, if it's a lot of ifs, I realize, but if it were a proportional vote, it would have gone to the House, and the House would have picked Trump regardless. A little bit heartbreaking, I'm not sure. But that's the basic difference between a winner take all and a proportional election. I'm sure I overwhelmed you. I hope you paused me at some point during this. So, the Electoral College system, this is the last thing I'll talk about, but it's kind of important, is who the Electoral College system favors. So, I imagine you already got some of the pros and cons in this presentation, but it does favor swing states. So I love this little guy swinging back and forth. But this cartoon here has come up on the exam before. It basically shows that the Electoral College system favors swing states, states that go back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. So swing states are those states that shift their party preference each elections. So the idea here is that candidates do spend a lot of time in those states. They start campaigning and putting money into those states. I mean, I'm not saying Sanders did this, but it wouldn't surprise me if he focused on the states that he thought he could win. This is just for in the case of the primaries. Is you're going to put the most advertising. Bloomberg definitely did this, put a lot of advertising as in many places as he possibly could. So that's basically what would happen in the 2016 election too. Is Clinton probably put a lot of her time in states that she thought she could shift. However, the problem is she probably didn't spend enough time in this Rust Belt area. So that became a huge problem for Clinton in 2016, that Trump spent an overwhelming amount of time in this Rust Belt area trying to turn the vote for him. He probably knew he didn't need the popular vote. He just needed the most electors. And so that's what he did, is he campaigned in the Rust Belt and said basically, look, Democrats haven't done anything for you. I can do something for you. Vote for me in 2016. And he did. He shifted notoriously safe states in the Rust Belt to red. So yeah, the Rust Belt phenomenon, or the Rust Belt states, were notoriously Democrat, but shifted for Trump in 2020. I feel like this guy is Hillary Clinton and this ice cream is the Rust Belt. Anyway, okay. The other thing that the Electoral College system favors is small states. So it might not seem like it, but small states actually do have a favorable voter advantage, and this is why. So smaller states have more electors per person. I know that these states only have three, but that gives them a stronger voice in presidential elections compared to larger states, and here's why. So a state like Wyoming, which is the smallest state in America, with only 577,737 people, they only get three electors, but each elector only represents 192,000 people. So one elector represents the voice of 192,000. I know that seems like a lot, but not when you compare it to California, which is the largest state in the nation, with 39.56 million people, and we have 55 electors, but that means each elector is representing 719,000 people, which, if you compare to Wyoming, is a huge difference. One person representing almost 200,000 compared to one person representing 700,000. So when those electors cast their vote in Washington, D.C., after the November general election, it can make a huge difference. That's why Hillary Clinton can win the popular vote, or win the most people voting for her, but not win the Electoral College, is because the Electoral College is not completely proportional. So you don't need the most people to win, you need the most states to win. And yeah, you need big states. That's obviously very important, but you need the most. You need the most states to carry you to that White House. And that's what Trump's advantage was in the Rust Belt. Well, that is the Electoral College. There's some political cartoons that sort of demonstrate what I just talked about, that only swing states matter. That's where people concentrate. I think it says the rest of the electorate can just sit quietly and have a beer. Um, and over here, it says what the US election would be without the Electoral College, which makes kind of a point, is that the big states would be the only states that matter. The most populous states would be the only states that matter, and the small states wouldn't have much of a voice. So there's something to consider there. It's hard to think about when you're in California. You want all the power. All right. So I have two assignments for you that goes along with this presentation. They're both in Classroom. This just asks you to look at the Electoral College data in Wikipedia, and to basically compare the winner-take-all elections to the popular vote. And yeah, I will be available. The directions are pretty clear. There is an example, but I'll also be available for office hours on Wednesday via Zoom. So you can check in with me there or via email. Please write down your questions if you have any. I'm there for you. I love you guys. Be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.